The question struck Marcus Thompson like lightning, stopping him mid-breath behind the counter of his premier toy emporium. He gazed down at the small figure before him, a child no older than 6, her ebony braids adorned with colorful ribbons, her worn sneakers telling stories of countless adventures. In her tiny grip, she held crumpled dollar bills and scattered coins with the determination of someone on a sacred mission. "Excuse me, mister," the little girl repeated, her voice carrying the weight of pure hope. "I'd like to purchase a father, please." The bustling sounds of his flagship Chicago store, children's laughter, parents chatting, the gentle hum of holiday shoppers, faded into absolute silence. Marcus felt every pair of eyes in the establishment drawn to this extraordinary moment unfolding before them. "Sweetheart, what exactly are you looking for?" Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible above his racing heartbeat. "A daddy," she stated with unwavering clarity, carefully placing her money on the pristine glass surface. "My big sister Sophie told me this is the most amazing toy store in all of Chicago. She promised me you sell everything here, so I've been saving to buy myself a father." The other customers had ceased their browsing entirely. The typical symphony of family conversations dissolved into an uncomfortable hush. Marcus could sense every soul in his store witnessing this profound exchange. "Angel, we specialize in toys here," Marcus managed, his throat constricting with unexpected emotion. "We don't offer people for sale." The child's expression crumpled with bewilderment. "But I really need one. My mama went to be with the angels last Christmas, and my sister works from sunrise to sunset. I watch other children at the playground with their daddies, and they seem so joyful. They get pushed high on swings and carried like precious cargo and hear magical bedtime stories." Her voice diminished with each confession. "I thought if I saved enough pennies, maybe I could have one too." Marcus felt moisture gathering in his eyes. Behind the little girl, he observed his entire store had gone completely still. Even his teenage staff members had abandoned their tasks to listen. This wasn't merely a child's whimsical request. This was desperate longing wrapped in the most innocent packaging imaginable. "Tell me your name, sweetheart," Marcus said, stepping around the counter to meet her at eye level. "Emma," she replied, wiping her nose with her small hand. "Emma Rodriguez. And you're the store owner, right?" "The person who decides what can be sold here?" "Yes, I am," Marcus answered, his voice catching slightly. "Can you tell me about your sister?" Emma's face illuminated with genuine warmth. "Sophie is absolutely the best sister in the whole universe. She's beautiful and brilliant, and she takes care of me all by herself. But she's always exhausted because she works 3 different jobs. She leaves before I wake up and returns after I've eaten dinner with Mrs. Martinez next door. Sometimes I hear her crying late at night when she thinks I'm asleep." Marcus's heart constricted painfully. He reflected on his own childhood, the devastating void his father's passing had created when he was merely 8 years old. He remembered asking his mother similar impossible questions, wondering why other kids had fathers while he didn't. "Emma, having a daddy isn't something you can purchase," Marcus explained gently. "It happens when people care deeply for each other, like when couples fall in love in fairy tales." "Like in the movies?" Emma asked, her eyes sparkling with renewed hope. "Sometimes, yes. So if my sister Sophie married someone wonderful, then I would have a daddy?" Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice to remain steady. Around them, several customers were openly dabbing their eyes with tissues. One elderly woman had retrieved a handkerchief and was patting her cheeks. "How much money would that require?" Emma inquired, gazing down at her crumpled currency. "I have $5.42. Is that sufficient for Sophie to find someone kind?" Before Marcus could formulate a response, the store's entrance bells chimed frantically. A young Latina woman burst through the doorway, her stunning face etched with panic. She wore a uniform from the neighborhood diner, her dark hair escaping from a ponytail that had loosened from running. "Emma," she called out, scanning the store desperately. "Emma, where are you?" "Sophie." Emma waved enthusiastically. "I'm here. I'm buying us a daddy." The woman, Sophie, froze when she spotted her little sister standing beside Marcus. Her gaze moved from Emma to the money on the counter to Marcus's tear-streaked face. Understanding dawned instantly. "Oh no," Sophie whispered, rushing over. "Emma, what have you done?" "I asked the store man to sell me a daddy," Emma explained proudly. He says it doesn't work like that, but maybe if you marry someone nice, then I can have one. Do you think you could marry someone, Sophie, please? Sophie's face cycled through a dozen emotions: embarrassment, heartbreak, exhaustion, and something that resembled surrender. She knelt down and enveloped Emma in a fierce embrace. "Baby, I'm so sorry," she whispered into Emma's hair. "I'm so sorry." Marcus watched this intimate scene unfold, feeling like an intruder on an intensely private moment, yet unable to look away. There was something about Sophie's fierce protectiveness and obvious devotion to her little sister that struck him profoundly. And there was something about the way she carried herself, proud despite her circumstances, strong despite being overwhelmed. "I need to return to work," Sophie said, standing up and avoiding Marcus's gaze. "Come on, Emma, Mrs. Martinez is worried." "But what about the daddy?" Emma asked, looking between Sophie and Marcus. Sophie's shoulders sagged. "That's not how life works, baby. Come on." As they turned to leave, Marcus made a decision that would transform all their lives forever. "Wait," he called out. Sophie's alarm shrieked at 4:45 a.m., the same harsh sound that began every single day. She slipped out of the narrow bed she shared with Emma, careful not to disturb her little sister. In the pale light filtering through their apartment's threadbare curtains, she could see Emma's peaceful expression, still clutching the stuffed rabbit their mother had given her before the illness took her away. Their apartment was cramped, just one bedroom, a small living space and a kitchen with appliances that functioned sporadically. But it was spotless and it was theirs, and Sophie was determined to maintain it that way. She gathered her cleaning supplies and uniform from the closet, moving silently through their morning ritual. By 5:15 a.m., she was on the city bus heading downtown, traveling to her first job of the day. The corporate building was 42 floors of gleaming glass and steel, filled with attorneys and executives who earned more in a single month than Sophie made in an entire year. She spent 3 hours sanitizing their offices, emptying waste bins, vacuuming carpets, and scrubbing restrooms. The work was honest, but it was invisible. Most days she never encountered the people who worked in these offices. They arrived after she departed, lived their important lives, and returned home to families who had never worried about choosing between rent and groceries. By 8:45 a.m., Sophie was back on the bus, heading to the diner where she worked the lunch shift. This was her preferred job despite paying the least. She enjoyed the customers, mostly construction workers, shop owners, and elderly people who treated her like family. They knew her name, asked about Emma, and left tips when they could afford to. "Morning, Sophie," called out Rosa, the head cook. "How's that little sister of yours?" "She's wonderful," Sophie replied, tying her apron around her waist. Started asking about why other kids have fathers and she doesn't. Rosa's face softened. She was in her 50s, had raised 5 children as a single mother herself. That's a difficult age for those questions. "I don't know what to tell her anymore," Sophie confessed, refilling salt shakers. "She sees families at the park, watches movies where everyone has a daddy, and I can see her trying to understand what's missing from our lives." "Nothing's missing from your lives, Mija," Rosa said firmly. "You're doing the best you can, but was she?" Sophie wondered as she served coffee and took orders. Yesterday, Emma had asked if they could attend the father-daughter dance at school. Sophie had explained that it was for daddies, not sisters, and watched Emma's face fall. Then Emma had suggested that maybe Sophie could pretend to be her daddy, and Sophie's heart had shattered a little. The lunch rush kept her busy until 3:15 p.m. Then it was time for job number 3, stocking shelves at the supermarket until 10:30. Kim, Mrs. Martinez, their elderly neighbor, collected Emma from school and watched her until Sophie returned home. Sophie hated imposing on the sweet old woman, but she had no alternative. "How was school today?" Sophie asked when she finally made it home that night. "Good," Emma said, but she seemed distracted. "Sophie, can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart. Why don't we have any money?" The question was so direct, so innocent that Sophie had to sit down. "What do you mean?" "Well, Ashley's mom stays home and bakes cookies with her after school, and Michael's dad took him to Disney World, and Jessica got new shoes for her birthday. Why can't we do things like that?" Sophie pulled Emma onto her lap, searching for words that would make sense to a 6-year-old. "Remember how Mama got sick and had to go to heaven?" Emma nodded. "Well, when someone dies, sometimes they leave behind money to take care of their family. But Mama didn't have any money saved up because all of it went to the doctors trying to make her better. So now it's just you and me, and I have to work extra hard to pay for our apartment and food and everything we need. Is that why you're always tired? Sometimes I get tired, Sophie admitted. But taking care of you makes me happy even when I'm tired. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I wish we had a daddy who could help. That night after Emma fell asleep, Sophie sat at their small kitchen table with a calculator and a stack of bills. No matter how she rearranged the numbers, they didn't add up. The rent was increasing next month. Emma was outgrowing her clothes and winter was approaching, which meant higher heating bills. She thought about what Emma had said about wanting a daddy. It wasn't about romance or companionship for Sophie. It was about simple survival. A partner would mean shared expenses, someone to watch Emma when she was at work, someone to help carry the crushing weight of responsibility. But who would want to take on a broke waitress with a kid? Sophie looked in the mirror and saw the exhaustion in her own eyes, the way stress had aged her beyond her 23 years. She was attractive enough, she supposed, but beauty didn't pay bills or provide the kind of stability a family needed. The next day, during her break at the diner, Sophie made a decision. She walked the 7 blocks to Marcus's toy store, the one Emma had been discussing all week. She stood outside for 15 minutes, watching families enter and exit with shopping bags full of toys that cost more than she made in a week. Finally, she pushed through the door. The store was enormous, filled with every toy imaginable. Children ran between the aisles while their parents followed behind. Credit cards ready. Sophie felt out of place in her diner uniform, but she was determined. She found the customer service desk and waited in line behind a woman returning a bicycle. Can I help you? Asked the teenage clerk. I'd like to speak to the owner, Sophie said. About my sister. The clerk looked confused. Is there a problem with a purchase? No, my sister was here yesterday. She asked to buy a daddy. I need to apologize. The clerk's expression changed. Oh, you're Emma's sister. Mr. Thompson told us all about that. Hold on. 5 minutes later, Marcus Thompson appeared. He was tall, well-dressed, and had kind eyes that seemed genuinely concerned. You must be Sophie, he said. I've been hoping to see you again. Marcus Thompson's corner office on the 35th floor offered a panoramic view of the entire city, but he rarely gazed out the windows anymore. Success had a way of making the world feel smaller, not larger. His desk was covered with reports from his 14 toy stores, profit margins that would make shareholders smile, and invitations to charity galas he would attend alone. At 34, Marcus was worth more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. Thompson Toys had started as a single store when he was 26, built with inheritance money and a desperate need to create something meaningful. Now it was a chain that brought joy to thousands of children, but Marcus couldn't remember the last time he'd felt truly happy himself. The encounter with Emma had shaken something loose inside him. For 3 days, he'd been unable to focus on quarterly reports or expansion plans. Instead, he kept seeing her innocent face, hearing her voice asking to buy a daddy, feeling the echo of his own childhood pain. Marcus walked to the window and looked down at the busy street below. Somewhere out there, Sophie was working her 3 jobs while Emma waited with a neighbor. The thought made his chest tight with an emotion he couldn't quite name. His assistant, Jennifer, knocked on the door. Mr. Thompson, your 2-hour appointment is here. Cancel it, Marcus said without turning around. Sir?
Cancel all my meetings today.
I need to think. After Jennifer left, Marcus opened his desk drawer and pulled out a framed photo he kept hidden there. It showed him at age 8 standing next to his father at the groundbreaking ceremony for what would become Thompson Construction, the company that had made his family wealthy. His father, David Thompson, was smiling broadly, his hand on Marcus's shoulder. 3 months after that photo was taken, David Thompson died of a heart attack on a construction site. Marcus had been in school when it happened, working on a science worksheet about the solar system, unaware that the most important person in his world was gone. The funeral was a blur of black clothes and condolences. Marcus remembered asking his mother when Daddy was coming home, not understanding that heaven was a place you couldn't drive back from. He'd offered to give up his allowance, his toys, even his bedroom if it would bring his father back. Money can't buy everything, his mother had told him gently. Some things are more valuable than all the money in the world. But 9-year-old Marcus had decided she was wrong. Money bought security, comfort, the ability to fix problems. If they'd had more money, maybe his father wouldn't have had to work so hard. Maybe he would have gone to the doctor sooner. Maybe he would still be alive. Marcus had spent the next 25 years proving his theory right. Money could buy almost everything. Houses, cars, experiences, even happiness for other people through his charitable donations. But it couldn't buy back his father. And it couldn't fill the hollow space in his chest that had been empty for so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to be whole. Until 3 days ago, when a little girl with braids had reminded him that some forms of pain were universal. Marcus picked up his phone and dialed his private investigator, a man he used for background checks on potential business partners. "Frank, I need you to find some information for me," Marcus said. "But I want you to be discreet." "Very discreet. What do you need?" "There's a young woman named Sophie Rodriguez. She works at Milano's Diner on Oak Street. Has a 6-year-old sister named Emma. I need to know their situation, where they live, what they need, how I can help without making it obvious." Frank was quiet for a moment. "This isn't business-related, is it?" "No," Marcus admitted. "It's personal. Mr. Thompson, with respect, you've never asked me to investigate anyone for personal reasons before. Are you sure about this?" Marcus thought about Emma's hopeful face, about Sophie's exhausted eyes when she'd come to collect her sister from the store. "I'm sure." 2 days later, Frank's report arrived via encrypted email. The facts were laid out in stark, clinical language that somehow made them more heartbreaking. Sophie Rodriguez, age 23, high school graduate, partial college scholarship lost when mother became ill. Mother died of cancer 14 months ago, left significant medical debt, currently works 3 jobs, cleaning service 5 a.m. to 8:30 a.m., Milano's Diner 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., Wilson's Market 4 p.m. to 10:30 p.m., annual income approximately $32,000, rent on 1-bedroom apartment $1,300 per month, guardian to sister Emma Rodriguez, age 6, since mother's death, no other family, outstanding debts $52,000 in medical bills, $3,800 in credit cards, assets 2009, Honda Civic with 190,000 miles, value approximately $2,800. Marcus read the report 3 times, each detail hitting him like a physical blow. Sophie was barely keeping her head above water, working herself to exhaustion for an income that would never be enough, and she was doing it all for Emma, sacrificing her own future to give her sister a chance. That evening, Marcus drove to the neighborhood where they lived. It wasn't dangerous, but it wasn't safe either. The apartment building was old but maintained, the kind of place where people worked hard and minded their own business. He sat in his car across the street, watching lights come on in windows as people returned from work. At 10:45 p.m., he saw Sophie walking down the sidewalk, her shoulders slumped with fatigue. She climbed the steps to her building slowly, like each step required enormous effort. Marcus wanted to get out of the car, to offer help, to do something. But what could he say? How could he explain his presence without sounding like a stalker? Instead, he drove home to his empty mansion in Lincoln Park, where every room was perfectly decorated and completely lifeless. He ate dinner alone at a dining table that could seat 12, surrounded by expensive art and uncomfortable silence. That night, Marcus lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about second chances and the strange ways fate worked. He'd spent years building a business empire, but he'd never built a family. He'd donated millions to charities, but he'd never truly touched an individual life. Maybe it was time to change that. Maybe it was time to find out if money could buy something after all. Not happiness exactly, but the opportunity for happiness. The chance for a little girl to have a father figure, for an exhausted young woman to have help, for a lonely man to have a purpose beyond profit margins. The next morning, Marcus made a phone call to his head of human resources. "I need to create a new position," he said. "Director of Children's Programming for the flagship store. I want someone special for this job, someone who understands what kids really need." "What are the qualifications?" his HR director asked. Marcus smiled, thinking of Sophie's fierce protectiveness and obvious love for her sister. "Someone who knows that the most important things in life can't be bought." Sophie's hands trembled as she stood outside the corporate offices of Thompson Toys. The building was 35 floors of gleaming glass and steel, The kind of place where important people made important decisions that affected thousands of lives. She felt small in her best outfit, a navy blue dress she'd bought at a thrift store for her mother's funeral and had worn to every important occasion since. The receptionist, a perfectly groomed woman in an expensive suit, looked up with a polite but distant smile. "Can I help you?" "I have an appointment with Mr. Thompson," Sophie said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Sophie Rodriguez, of course. Please take a seat. He'll be with you shortly." Sophie sat on a leather couch that probably cost more than she made in 6 months. Around her, the lobby buzzed with activity. People in designer suits talking on phones, assistants carrying important-looking documents, the quiet hum of serious business being conducted. She still couldn't believe she was here. 3 days ago, Marcus Thompson had shown up at the diner during her lunch shift. He'd ordered coffee and waited until her break, then asked if they could talk privately. Sophie had been suspicious at first. Wealthy men didn't usually seek out broke waitresses unless they wanted something inappropriate. But there had been something genuine in his eyes, something that reminded her of the way he'd looked at Emma in the toy store. "I have a business proposition for you," he'd said simply. "I'd like you to consider working for me." Now riding the elevator to the 22nd floor, Sophie wondered if she was making a huge mistake. What did she know about working in corporate America? She'd cleaned office buildings, but she'd never actually worked in one. Her experience was serving food and stocking shelves, not whatever it was that happened in places like this. Marcus's office was bigger than her entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city that took her breath away. But what struck her most was how empty it felt despite all the expensive furniture and artwork. It was beautiful but cold, like a hotel room where no one actually lived. "Sophie, thank you for coming," Marcus said, standing up from behind his massive desk. He looked different here in his own environment, more polished, more intimidating. But his smile was the same one he'd given Emma in the toy store, warm and genuine. "Mr. Thompson, I appreciate you thinking of me, but I'm not sure what I could possibly do for a company like this," Sophie said, taking the chair he offered across from his desk. "Please call me Marcus, and I think you're exactly what we need." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened in the store with Emma, about what she said, what she needs. It made me realize that for all our success selling toys, we don't really understand children. Not the way someone like you does." Sophie frowned. "I don't understand. I want to create a new position, Director of Children's Programming for our flagship store. Someone who can develop activities, events, programs that truly connect with kids. Someone who knows what it's like to struggle, who understands that not every family can afford to spend hundreds of dollars on toys, but every child deserves to feel special." "You want me to plan activities?" Sophie asked, trying to process what he was saying. "More than that, I want you to create experiences. Saturday morning story times for kids whose parents work weekends. After-school programs where children can do homework and play while their parents finish work. Birthday parties for families who can't afford big celebrations. Programs that make our store a place where every child feels welcome, regardless of their family situation." Sophie stared at him, wondering if this was some kind of elaborate joke. "Marcus, I appreciate the thought, but I don't have any experience with that kind of work. I'm a waitress and a cleaning lady. I never even finished college. But you raised a 6-year-old sister while working 3 jobs. You know more about what children need than any business school graduate." Marcus pulled out a folder from his desk. "I've done some research on programs like this. They exist in some places, but not here. Not in a way that really serves working families." He slid the folder across to her. Inside were articles about toy stores that had become community centers, research about child development and play, salary information that made Sophie's eyes widen. "This can't be right," she said, pointing to the salary figure. "This is more than I make at all 3 of my jobs combined." "It's competitive for the position," Marcus said simply. "Plus full health benefits, paid vacation, and flexible hours so you can be there for Emma after school." Sophie felt like she was dreaming. Why would you offer this to me? You don't even know me." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, looking out the window at the city below. "When I was 8, my father died suddenly. My mother did her best, but she was overwhelmed, working constantly to keep us afloat. I spent a lot of time alone wondering why other kids had daddies and I didn't. Sound familiar?" Sophie nodded, understanding beginning to dawn. I built this company thinking that if I could bring joy to other children, maybe it would fill the hole that losing my father left behind. But watching Emma in the store that day, I realized I'd been approaching it all wrong. I'd been selling happiness instead of creating it. I'd been targeting families who already had everything instead of families who needed support. So this is charity, Sophie said, bristling slightly. No, Marcus said firmly. This is business. Good business. There are thousands of families in this city like yours. Hardworking people who love their children but struggle to give them extras. If we can create programs that serve them, we build loyalty, we build community, and we build a sustainable model that other stores can replicate. You wouldn't be doing me a favor, Sophie. I'd be hoping you'd do me the honor of helping me build something meaningful. Sophie looked down at the folder again, at the salary that would change everything for her and Emma. No more 3 jobs. No more exhaustion. No more choosing between rent and groceries. But there was something else. Something she was afraid to hope for. In Marcus's eyes, she saw the same loneliness she felt in her own life. The same sense of carrying burdens alone, of building walls to protect against disappointment. Can I think about it? She asked, of course. Take all the time you need. Marcus stood up and walked to the window. But Sophie, whatever you decide, I want you to know that what you're doing for Emma, the sacrifices you're making, the love you're showing her, that's the most important job in the world. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. As Sophie rode the elevator down, her mind raced with possibilities. For the first time in over a year, she allowed herself to imagine a different kind of life. A life where she could be there when Emma got home from school. A life where they could afford new clothes and birthday parties and maybe even a vacation. A life where she might have time to be more than just a survivor. That evening, she sat at their small kitchen table with Emma, helping with homework while Mrs. Martinez cooked dinner next door. Sophie, what would you think if I got a different job? She asked carefully. Emma looked up from her coloring book. A job where you don't have to work at night? Maybe. Would you be home more? Probably. Emma grinned, showing her missing front tooth. Then I think it's the best idea ever. Sophie smiled, her decision made. Sometimes the biggest risks were worth taking, especially when you weren't just gambling with your own future. That night she called Marcus and accepted the job. What did you think of this heartwarming story? Have you ever witnessed a moment that completely changed your perspective on what truly matters in life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to Echoes of Heart for more stories that celebrate the power of love, family, and second chances. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that might just restore your faith in happy endings.